A very warm good evening to you. We're coming to you from the Dodds prison in Dodds St. Philip. This is One-on-One, and our very special guest is Superintendent DeCarlo Payne. Sir, welcome to the program.
A pleasant good evening to you, ma'am, and thanks for having me on the program.
You're most welcome. You've just had the graduation and inclusion of 15 new recruits. How are you seeking to effectively manage your human resources here at the prison?
Okay, before I get going, we just want to extend a heartfelt thanks to the Minister of Home Affairs Information, as well as the Permanent Secretary and the Minister of Home Affairs and Information for the support that they, tremendous support that they're offering to the Barbados Prison Service at this time. One of the main challenges that we would have been experiencing in the past is the whole issue relating to staff shortages. And as a result of that, the prison service embarked on a program or a thrust to recruit. At the time, we would have been looking to recruit about 45 to 50 staff to bring our numbers right back up to the full establishment. I will say that with the passing out of those 15 that we just had last week, Friday, we are now at a total of 361. And we still have another 11 staff members to recruit. So the recruiting cycle will continue at the end of this year. Hopefully by January, we'll be to that final recruiting cycle. All right. You're never really ever in a position to say you have enough resources or human resources, right? So what we intend to do is to make sure that we can utilize all the resources that we have here.
Yes.
In a way where you will match the skills and the talents of the staff to the jobs that we have available here, so that you will not be basically overutilizing or not utilizing the resources. But these particular 15 that we've just graduated, that complement was already absorbed into the shift rotation cycle or system. So those are were basically to strengthen the shifts, to bring the shifts up to a number. We're hoping to get all the shifts up to a number of 36, all right, per shift.
I know you place a very heavy emphasis on training. What does that training look like for new recruits as you make efforts to integrate them into the prison system as officers?
Okay, the new trust in relation to the training program that we have here is very expansive, and it covers a lot of different areas. We even have gone into having facilitation done by specialized individuals in terms of the fire service, the police service. We also had persons in talking to them about financial management and such like it. But the majority of the training is based on our rules, regulations, policies, and procedures, especially the Prison Act Cap 166, to ensure that they're capable to operate and carry out their functions in the manner that is enshrined in law. So you'll have things like escort duties, being able to understand and calculate sentences, calculations, remission and such like of sentences. They also have duties in terms of managing inmates on the buildings, in terms of supervision of the inmates properly on the buildings. They also have lectures as it relates to the laws governing the organization as well as the public service, all right? So it's very expansive. And then there's a physical component to it. They also have a component that speaks to the security side of the house as well. And also you'll get a component that speaks to weapons training, as well as this whole thing relating to self-defense training and so on. So it's very wide. It's very wide-ranging.
With the persons here at Dodds prisons who are to be released into society, how are you seeking to ensure that there's that smooth transition from the prison system to being effective citizens and potential employees in society, in the wider society?
As you know, Mitchell, that's one of my areas that I feel passionately about. And as a result of that, we will have reviewed all of our rehabilitative systems here. All right, so we realized that based on the reviews, there's a need to place more emphasis on entrepreneurship and skills-related training, as well as developing those who have a deficit in terms of academic studies in terms of qualifications and so on. And basically, we just came out of CXC, and I can say without a shadow of doubt that that was a high point there because we actually had 46 entrances to do studies in terms of English language, principles of business, social studies. Those are the main ones. And we ended up with 24 passes out of that 46 entrance, all right? And you had, I think, as much as about 6 who got grade 1s.
Oh, wow.
Then you had about 7 who got grade 2s. And then the others were grade 3s, 4s, and 5s, right?
Are the convicts generally interested in learning whilst they're here? What does it take to push them into that interest where academics is concerned?
Based on my observations, I will say that they're showing a more interest now in especially the skills related areas because they get to realize that if you have a skill, you can survive or should be able to survive out there instead of having to go and try to find a job and such like which is a lot more difficult. All right, so a lot of emphasis now is placed on NVQ type training, CVQ type training, but with a strong leaning towards entrepreneurship because that makes you more independent.
Superintendent, can you delve into that interest that prisoners have where entrepreneurship is concerned and the importance of ex-convicts being trained where entrepreneurship is concerned as well?
Sure, no problem. All right. In recent time, we've placed a lot of emphasis on the whole issue related to entrepreneurship as it relates to partnerships with the BCC, Palmarine, and there were about 40-something inmates who would have gone through basic cooking, bartending, also being able to manage the front offices as it relates to this whole thing with hospitality. And we find that a lot of interest is being placed. You know, we just had about over 60-something persons expressing the interest in the second cohort that's going to start in another couple of days. I think only 9th or so. Yes, a new cohort is going to start shortly. So from that perspective, we've seen a lot of interest. We also saw persons having an interest in the music program, being able to write music as well as write poems and such like it, literary arts and so on. Also, there's an improved interest as well in photography and videography in relation to the inmates as well. That in itself strengthens on the existing skills related training that we have here, like cabinet shop training, tailor shop training, auto body and mechanics training, as well as at one point we were doing some graphic art as well. Another area that we are placing emphasis on now is the whole issue related to information technology training and being able to utilize the technology to become self-employed as well. So we're working to try to get a computer lab up as I speak, right? And as soon as we get that lab up, then we'll be able to do a lot more in terms of graphic art and all the rest of those things. So it's a whole set of information, there's a whole set of projects and so on that we actually have in the pipeline that we are trying to help to ensure that we do our part here at the prison.
What are you doing to ensure that ex-convicts are given a second chance? Why should an employer hire someone who is within the prison system for those who may be watching and would have continuous concerns?
Well, my take on it is this. The inmates are coming from society. When they complete their sentences here, they're going back to society. They're products of society. So I believe that if they're to make a contribution and a meaningful contribution to the society, then the society has to come on board. Everyone has to come on board. It's not a prison service related issue. It's an issue for all of us in the island, right? And I believe that if they can contribute positively to what's happening in society, then that will add to their contribution to the national fabric of Barbados as well in terms of economic, social development, the whole 9 yards. All right.
You're being guided by the Barbados Results Framework document. What is that document exactly, and how are you pulling your vision from what is written within that guiding document?
Okay, the Barbados Framework document, basically Results Framework document, is a document that once was referred to as the Commitment for Results document, which was basically rebranded. All right, so it speaks to you outlining clearly what are your objectives that you have for the organization, and we have 5 main objectives. Those 5 objectives speaks to maintaining our core prison operations, an emphasis on developing our human resources, also giving opportunities to inmates in relation to rehabilitative programs and opportunities. We also have a component that speaks to the development of staff in relation to our human resources and improving our business practices, which speaks to policy, directions, directives, reviewing our laws, all those things. So it's a comprehensive document, and it has a cost attached to each area that we would have identified as our main objectives. And one critical is maintaining the national security fabric in terms of safety of people and society, basically. All right, and that particular one is very critical because, as you know, that will have a component tied to it as it relates to escapes and incidents and so on, or incidents in terms of violence and such like it. So those are the things that guide what we do here. For instance, the one that speaks to improvements to the safety network of the country, that is guided by a violence reduction strategy that we have here. And basically, so we believe that if we can reduce violence within the prison service or the prison system, then it will have an impact positive on society, because most of the guys come in for some kind of violent activity. So we got to find ways to address that. And those interventions speaks to psychological. They also speaks to anger management training, and also being able to interact and reason and talk through things instead of just resorting to violence in one go. All right. So in a sense, we believe that there's a very comprehensive approach to addressing some aspects of rehabilitation, because we believe if we can tone down persons in terms of their anger situation, then they will have the chance to become more open to reason. Right.
In looking at your violence reduction strategy, that particular pillar, what do you think are the main reasons for violence? We've been seeing a surge of crime as of recent. In terms of your interaction with the inmates, what is the reason for this?
Okay, based on the violence reduction strategy that we introduced here, and based on the trends that we are seeing coming from society here, the whole thing as it relates to links to gang activity, or we will say these groups, these social groups or gatherings that are affiliated to organized crime, which speaks to gangs basically, and the fact that they're vying for turf. They also engage in the drug trade as well. So they're vying for turf from that aspect of it as well as trying to gain prominence in the underworld basically. So that, I believe, is part of it. And then persons want also to be in control, right?
So there's a power fight more
Yes.
than anything else, a struggle for prominence.
Yes, power dynamic. Yes.
In having that conversation regarding this fight for prominence and power amongst gang leaders in Barbados, how much faith do you have in the government in reforming the prison system?
Total faith, because I know that my minister is fully committed to the whole issues relating to reforms. The reforms were long in coming, because reforms basically is not something that can be done overnight. It is something that has to be done over a period of time, and then it has to be consistent with what's happening current in terms of what's happening in society at this current time, because the systems are changing so rapidly that by the time you do one set of reforms, those reforms become outdated, and it's a constant process. So it's something that has to be constant. And as I said, I know that the ministry, as well as the minister, as well as the PS, they are fully committed to this whole issue relating to the reforms of the criminal justice system, not just prison.
What do you think it would take for total transformation? We speak of reform, but total transformation in terms of the psyche of Barbadians in welcoming ex-convicts back into society?
Well, I believe it will take a while, and it's going to take a lot of work, but it has to have a major trust in relation to the sensitization of the public as it relates to this whole phenomenon of persons being accepted back into society when they pay their debt to society by being here and incarcerated. Another thing too is that I believe that if we introduce things like parole, as well as halfway housing, as well as different community sentencing options as well, I believe those will go a long way. But then it has to have a monitoring component, because if you're just releasing people back and there's no monitoring and there's no follow-up, more than likely the majority will fall back into crime, right?
What does that monitoring component look like for you?
For me, it will be tied up into the whole issue relating to parole, and this whole issue of ankle monitoring, which is a policy position that the government, I know they're pursuing. But as it relates to parole, you'll have parole officers who can actually monitor what's happening with the persons when they're released, and they will have to report basically to some particular individual or individuals in terms of those persons will be managing them as a work in progress. So I believe if we have a monitoring component, that will go a long way. Because if they're just out there, from leaving prison, they're out there, nobody to guide what is happening after that, they'll do things, right? But if they have a structure, I believe that will help, and that will go a long way to changing the trajectory. And I also believe that the powers that we have to make available as well, including the private sector, opportunities for jobs, opportunities for housing, as well as additional opportunities for persons to be able to have funding available that they can in going to these entrepreneurship opportunities, to explore those entrepreneurial opportunities as well.
If the struggle that you're seeing is for power and prominence, and not necessarily because of financial issues amongst ex-convicts, how do we fix that particular problem if the struggle is not for financial gain, but more so for prominence and power?
Well, it's for prominence and power, but it also has a financial component, because most of it is driven by the drug trade. All right, and we're not driven by the drug trade. I believe it's being driven by the availability of firearms as well. All right, so one of the things that I believe that will have to happen is that there has to be a reduction in the whole issue relating to a market for drug use, or a market for drug trafficking. That has to be addressed, as well as a reduction in the availability of firearms. Those issues has to be addressed, because basically those are the original points that will lead to all the other things that are happening, right? As well as social policy objectives and social, like those has to be looked at as well. So it has to be comprehensive, because it has to look at the home, it has to look at the schools, churches, civic society, the whole 9 yards, right? It has to be a different approach.
On the conversation of the firearms and the aspiration amongst some civilians for power and prominence, how are you ensuring that corruption is rooted out within the prison system, that it is non-existent?
Okay, thanks for the question. All right, basically during recruiting, even before recruiting, it goes all the way through the whole issue relating to the vetting process. We start from there. All right, let me say up front that the Barbados Prison Service has a zero tolerance approach to corruption in any form. All right, what we do is we go through a host of processes leading up to recruiting: polygraph testing, ID tech testing, mandatory drug testing, police background checks, community background checks. So a whole suite of checks are done to ensure that we get the right or the best possible candidate. No system is ever perfect. All right, so I wouldn't fool myself and suggest to anyone in Barbados that that's the case. But what we do is constantly monitor the progress of the staff, not just the recruits, the staff, right? And where there is risk, we try to mitigate that risk with the different systems that we have here. In terms of the whole issue of staff being involved in corrupt activity, it comes down to an individual and how they feel about their integrity, how they feel about their character. It has to do with their whole background in terms of socialization and how they were brought up as well. Because if people have those values instilled in them early, then it's very seldom that they will go over the line, all right? But we know from history that at least one or two will fall through the cracks, right? There's no getting away from it. And what happens here in the prison is a mirror of what happens in society, basically, right?
What do you consider corruption, though?
Corruption is wide. In my view, it's not a myopic thing, because corruption can be persons involved in drug trafficking, persons involved in introducing illegal contraband items into the institution. Corruption could be in the mind in terms of your thoughts, relaying information on security matters here. That also falls into it. Also, it has to do with, as I said, a thought process, because it has to do with values. It comes down to principles as well, and conscience. So all that's all part of it. It's not one particular area. It's wide-ranging. Corruption is wide-ranging. They have financial corruption as well, right? So there's a lot of different scenarios or a lot of different connotations that can speak to corruption, but corruption in itself is wide-ranging.
Is there any hope, and what does that hope look like for an officer who may have been found guilty of corrupt practices?
Well, the thing about it is that the prison service is not in a position to determine the outcomes of those issues. We don't get directly involved in that. We'll do our initial investigations. If it's a police matter, then the police will do what they have to do. From the time we do what we have to do and it goes beyond us, then we don't have any control of what happens there. But I know that there are certain disciplinary penalties that are involved in relation to staff, and there are also certain disciplinary penalties or penalties as it relates to the law and the law court. So we don't have any control over that.
Do you feel as if these conversations have been had in society about the inflow of drugs and guns and the penetration of certain communities? Do you feel as if this is linked to corruption within the justice system locally?
I can't speak to that part of it, but I believe that there's a need for more. There's a need for more sensitization. There's a need for more focus on the whole issue as to what is happening, what is driving these processes and such like it, or the phenomenon. And it has to do with research as well as the whole issue relating to sensitization of the public from an early age and continuously. It can't be just for one-off. It has to be a continuous flow in relation to the sensitization of the public.
And it is understandable not being able to speak to that specifically. I'm sure more of that would come from Minister Abrams. But how are you ensuring that international best practices and best standards are met under your watch?
Well, we have a human rights approach to managing the prison service here. We have the Mandela rules that we follow. We have the Bangkok rules that we follow. We have the UN rules as well, minimum standards for the treatment of inmates. We also have there's this thing that there's a handbook basically that was done by Andrew Cowley that speaks to the whole issue relating to human rights best practices in prison. So all of those are things that we are guided by, as well as doing research on what's happening in the international spaces as well, and what are the best practices that are current in terms of corrections and in terms of penal management as well.
What are some of the important pillars in the Bangkok rules and the Mandela rules?
Well, the almost all are the same in terms of the UN standards, because I believe they were driven or they were developed out of the UN standards. So the things like the basic rights would be like access to water, access to housing, access to shelter, access to food, access to clothing. Those are the main things, right? And a safe and secure environment. All the rest evolves around that.
Superintendent Payne, it was very good talking to you for this very first half of One-on-One. We have to take a short commercial break, but we'll be right back right after this.
Yo, this is your boy Mikey Mercer here. I was born in the city, I was raised in the city, and I love performing in the city, but you know what? I don't like to see it dirty. And that's the horrible thing about litter. Litter just mess up everything and quite look bad. Don't let the place look bad. Make it look nice. Barbados is a beautiful place. So let's keep the city clean. A clean city starts with me, and a clean city starts with you.
Do you have a query, complaint, compliment, or just a simple suggestion relating to a government service? If you do, then the Citizen Services Contact Center, or CSCC, is here for you. What is it? As part of the government's commitment to providing citizen-centric governance, this initiative has been designed to make it more convenient for Barbadians to voice concerns, file complaints, and offer suggestions about government services, all from the comfort of their own homes. You can reach the Citizen Services Contact Center by telephone at 573-7373 or by email at messagegovt@barbados.gov.bb. You also have the choice to WhatsApp the center at 266-4242. The CSCC operates between the hours of 7 a.m. and 9 p.m., Monday to Saturday. Again, the CSCC contacts are 573-7373 for calls, message govt@barbados.gov.bb for emails, and 266-4242 for WhatsApp.
Keep it clean, keep it green.
Barbadians, we invite you to get involved and play your part as we clean and green Barbados. Come into your community with media launches, bulk waste collection exercises, community engagement sessions, and giveaways. Get on board. Let's keep Barbados clean and green.
Beautiful, beautiful Barbados.
Welcome back to this very special one-on-one. We are here at Dodds Prison in Dodds St. Philip with Superintendent DeCarlo Payne. Sir, I wanted to continue on the issue of corruption. And for our viewers, I would like to ask, what were some of the measures taken in the past to root out corruption amongst officers?
Okay. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the question. In the past, okay, at Station Hill, when I would have joined the service at Station Hill, there were issues that we were addressing from back then. Basically, the Prisons Act speaks to certain actions that can be taken to address the issue of corruption within the prisons. Over time, the whole issue of addressing corruption in the prison system would have evolved to the point now where we have a Public Service Act as well, which supports the Prisons Act in relation to addressing that topic. You know, corruption is one of those topics that most people would prefer to shy away from the discussion, but at the end of the day is the reality. What makes the difference in when you address those issues is what makes the difference between having a safe environment or an unsafe environment. So at the end of the day, one has to take or make those decisions that are in the best interest of society, that are in the best interest of all concerned, and ensure that whatever strategies are employed are strategies that can root out corruption in one sense, but at the end of the day, create a more safer environment for all at the same time. So some of the issues I would have seen employed was where we would have brought disciplinary matters against staff and refer those to the PAD at the time. We've also had instances where we would have involved the police service, Barbados Police Service, and those issues, as you know, if a person is charged with a criminal offense, then that person has to be suspended. There's no getting away from it. And basically, depending on the outcome of those court matters, then it's fairly easy, because if the person is found guilty and the person is found guilty as it relates to a serious criminal offense, then the laws are clear. It's an automatic dismissal, right? Depending then again on the level of corruption that is, it might be just the deduction of contra items, then those outcomes basically are different in terms of the approaches are taken. So the approaches or the actions that are taken are rooted in law mainly. They're mostly rooted in law and a part of our disciplinary procedures as well.
What systems do you have in place to ensure that the prison service, we've had the documentary A Beacon of Excellence last year for Prison Month. So what systems are in place to ensure that officers live up to being beacons of excellence where the justice system is concerned?
So we have continued training and development as it relates to staff. Training and development is a lot of emphasis placed on this whole issue relating to being compromised or not to become compromised. Is also the focus is on making sure that the staff understand the ethical dilemmas that they will put themselves in, as well as making sure that they ensure that they follow good, sound, ethical practices at all times, basically, and that will help them to make those type of decisions that will redound to the betterment of themselves and the benefit of the service at the same time. So, as I said, it's a work in progress, because it's not something. No one system is ever foolproof. So it's a working process. It's an ongoing process, but it has to do with sensitizing staff all the time as we go along, ensuring that we have those systems in place to identify risks and make sure that we can mitigate those risks.
It is critical that you have a good working relationship with the Barbados Prison Service and the general public as well. How are you seeking to continue to build that trust between your officers and the wider community in Barbados?
Well, we have a lot of community outreach programs planned. Our PRO is one who places a lot of emphasis on that. We actually had career showcases as well. We would have been able to explain to the public what prison is all about and what we do here, and also give them the opportunity to make prison a career of choice. We also have situations where we work closely with NGOs, case in point, Care Community Group, the Prison Fellowship, and a number of other church organizations to help to ensure that they incorporate persons when they leave here back into society, as well as to ensure that the prison works closely with society and the communities in making sure that we can bring the image up in relation to what we are doing here.
Why do you think the inclusion of the church is so important after all of these years, where the reformulation of ex-convicts and the prison system is concerned?
I believe it's very important, because if you don't have a spiritual grounding, then more than likely you'll fall to do almost anything. So I believe that spiritual grounding helps. And if we go back to, say, the 60s and 70s and 80s, where your grandparents and someone would have been placing emphasis on the children having to go to church. There was no getting away from it. It was like you had to, it was like a mandated that you had to go look at what's happening now. The children of today, there's a choice, all right? So, but I believe that if you have a spiritual grounding, you're not going to fall too far away from the roots, all right? If you don't, then you'll do anything, because there'll be nothing to stop you, really.
For most of the cases that you have up here, you find that most convicts, for the most part, who have found themselves within DODS, have not had that spiritual grounding, and how do you get them back there?
Well, to me, a great majority of them don't have the spiritual grounding, but I find that when they come into the institution, they use it as an outlet, basically, to help with their rehabilitative processes. I believe it also influences person's conscience as well as their principle. It is a foundation in terms of principles, because almost everything in the world evolves around the whole issue of the master, the creator, and such like it. And they got to accept that that is a reality, all right? Because without that then I don't think the world would exist without a foundation of the religious side of it. All right? But because of the fact that the children or the younger generations have the choices now, and it's not something that somebody mandates that you do, then they lose track of what you will consider self-confidence, they lose track of self-discipline, they lose track of the foundations, basically, the basic principle foundations. Everything evolves around spiritual, the religious and spiritual foundation.
We've had conversations regarding self-sufficiency where the prison is concerned. Can you speak to that?
Sure.
And the latest updates that you may have?
Sure. We were mandated through the Sustainable Development Goals, because we are part of the government initiatives at that national level to ensure that the prison can be self-sufficient in crop farming, all the different types of vegetables, fruits, meats, fish, all the things that we can produce here that will help to ensure that our food bill goes down. And that also will add to security, food security at the national level. We've also been looking at introducing or implementing we will call a new irrigation system. Most of it is already in. It's just the drip lines that we are supposed to know to implement or basically introduce. And as soon as that is finished, then we'll have a fully operational irrigation system that can ensure that we will be able to produce vegetables, produce crops all year round. Right now we are mainly focused on doing a lot while the rainy season is in, but when the rainy season is finished, then we'll be able to go to the irrigation system and continue with the process. In terms of our meat production, we've just overhauled the chicken pens and so on, and the areas where the animals are. So hopefully in another month, by the end of this month, going into October, we should be back to rearing chickens again. Right? So what our goal is to ensure that the prison is self-sufficient. And so as we can complete that, any surplus, we're going to be sharing those surpluses with the BDF, because we're already in discussions with the BDF to ensure that we can supply them, or will help to supply them. And then we're looking to expand to the point where we can supply the QEH and school meals if necessary.
Would you be able to put a figure on how much that would be saving the government with the prison being completely self-sufficient?
Not at this point. We won't be able to put a figure on it, but I know it will run into thousands, if not millions. It will run into millions, because right now our food bill is about roughly 1.5 million or something about there, the food bill. All right? In that region, but it could be a bit more. But I believe that if we can produce the food, then that will reduce the bill. And then we can use the monies to do other things in relation to expanding what we do here. But I can't give a direct figure here. It will have to come based on the research on how far we expand in terms of the projects and such like it. But I know it will have an impact in terms on our overall budget as it relates to revenue generation.
Barbados has concerning statistics where non-communicable diseases are concerned. How are you ensuring that your prisoners continue to live and lead healthy, balanced lifestyles?
Okay, that's one of the areas that we were placing a lot of emphasis on recently. And we've just brought on board a consultant dietitian, who would also be able to help in relation to the type and composition of the meals that we will be serving here. One of the things that we would have given assurance to government is that we would ensure that they have 3 days a week where they are fresh meats, and we have maintained that from the time we gave that commitment late last year. All right? We are supposed to be making sure that we have the dietitian working closely with our medical practitioners, all right, to ensure that whatever diets the doctors come up with, the dietitians can basically work with them to ensure that we can get a composition that will be as close as possible to that, to reduce the whole instances of NDCs here, but at the same time it will feed into the national approach to reducing and managing NDCs as well.
Do you see any link between poor mental health of civilians or poor physical health and a life of crime, and that leading to a life of crime?
Well, yes, in a sense, because most of the times when persons come into the institution as admissions and there were persons who were using drugs, you see a whole completely different physical appearance when compared to when they leave here, right? So they go through a transformation process. Because not only that too, but most of the individuals who don't have a fixed place of abode is going to struggle to have or to get good balanced diets. So you will find that sometimes when they come here, this is where they really get a proper meal. So it means that some system has to be put in place out there also to help them. And I know that they're doing things because the guy Safri is doing things to help. And then you have Miss Thompson who is doing things to help in terms of feeding people, but that is not enough, basically.
You've had a pretty good win recently in terms of the prisoners who would have performed exceptionally well to some degree in the CXE exams.
Yes.
What do you think is the difference between them achieving this within the prison system and the fact they were not able to achieve this outside of the prison system?
Well, because the prison has focus programs. Not only that, I believe that some of the guys are telling themselves, okay, well, I'm here. It makes no sense to wasting the time when I can do things that will help put me in a better position that I can, become more independent when I leave. And the emphasis is being placed more now than before, because I find that in the past we would got a few people doing CXCs and so on, but there weren't many. But the numbers are rising all the time now. It means that people are taking responsibility for their actions and basically taking responsibility for themselves in terms of rehabilitative programs and such like it, because we're making them available. So if we make them available, we can't force you. We wouldn't force a person to rehabilitate, because if you do that, it's going to have a counterproductive outcome, because it means that they're not doing it genuinely. And I believe that a person will want or should want to rehabilitate. And I believe if they do that, then they'll put all into the whole process of rehabilitating. Right.
What does a proper functioning prison system look like to you?
Well, a proper functioning prison system is one that you'll never get a fully proper functioning prison service, because at the end of the day, is a work in progress.
Right.
And is a constantly evolving process. But for me, if you can get the complaints about health issues reduced, if you can get the whole issue related to the violence in the institution reduced as well, and it's been going down recently because we're not having any issues recently. If you can keep escapes and such like it minimum or basically zero, those are the things that will help to ensure that we do what we have to do here. Also, if we can make sure that the staff are well trained, and the whole issue relating to compensation packages are reasonable and not something that will discourage people from joining the service, then I believe that will help in relation to having a good functioning prison service.
How are you seeking to address the issues regarding compensation, late pay, reduced pay?
We don't have an issue with late pay. We don't have an issue with reduced pay, basically. The thing about this is, I believe our main issues here will be the whole issue relating to allowances in terms of upgrading the allowances, because they weren't upgraded for a long time, other than with raise of pays. So the whole issue with the discussion has to focus on terms and conditions of service. And I know that the central government is looking to do a regrading exercise in the system, so they'll have to use that opportunity to make representation for better upgrades in relation to terms and conditions of service.
Superintendent, what's the latest update regarding your tilapia farm? I know you would have spoken to the fresh meat production in terms of the chickens and so forth, but I know you also have a fish farm up here.
Yes, please. Okay, so the tilapia fish farm that's going is functioning. We're actually in the process of expanding the farm, but we also been looking at expanding in the sense that we have a irrigation pond, so we will also put fish in that irrigation pond as well. So the pond is basically full of fish now. The thing about it is trying to get them out and harvest them and such like it, but we are expanding. So we were given directives to expand, and that's the process that we're going through. Basically, right now, we're going through the process of having the fish farm expanded.
What's the general interest like from inmates towards farming and getting involved in the groundwork and that kind of thing?
Based on what you can see now in terms of the trends is increasing because the numbers working on the farm has dramatically increased. At one point the numbers were down, but I believe the numbers on the farm could be somewhere in the 20 something as 20 something now, right? But before you used to get a fairly small number because a lot of guys don't want to work in the hot sun. That's one of the things they throw them off, right? But other than that, you're seeing an interest in persons now coming back wanting to work on the farm.
There's any way around that?
Well, I don't think so because at the end of the day, the sun is going to shine.
Right.
Whether you want the sun to shine or not, it's going to shine. So, if a person can't cope with the heat, then they would prefer, I suppose they would prefer not to work in the hot sun. But we have found in recent times that a lot of people are gravitating, inmates are gravitating towards working on the farm. Some are working in crop production, and others are working in the animal husbandry side of the house as well. And we also have some working in terms of the fish farm as well.
And normally, is there training for the inmates to get involved in farming or groundwork?
Yes, there's basically a component of training, and there's also a component that is practical. But most of the work is training is done on the job basically. So we have guys who are trained, and in terms of instructors, so they're the ones who sort of instruct the inmates as to what they're supposed to do, right?
Do you have any idea what the percentage is like in terms of inmates who've undergone this training in terms of farming and so forth and using this for means of entrepreneurship when they leave the prison service?
I'm not sure what the numbers are. I will have to do the research on it, but I know a good couple who has left recently, haven't returned, and some of them have farms. There was one the guy that I was told he actually has a farm, and he was going to Polytechnic as well to try to expand his skills and such like it. But I believe some of them are also going into what's called aquaponics. That's where they're using the manure and water and so on to grow things as well as fish as well. So a lot of them are going into gravitating towards on those new type of technologies as well. But there are a few. I'm not sure what the numbers are right now.
Well, you made mention of the guy who was looking to get into the Polytechnic for the agricultural program. Do you find it is equally as different for inmates to try to further their education, get into BCC or the University of the West Indies, similarly to how it would be difficult for them to find a job?
The difficulty to my mind is reducing right now because I'm aware of some of the ones who were in the Palmering studies. When they actually left, they were continuing classes outside at Palmering. Because I saw some of them there when they went to lunch there. So I know that Palmering actually opened their arms to them because they had started the program here, and they're giving them the opportunity to continue the studies when they actually left. I don't know how many are still involved in the program, but I know that the opportunities are there, and they're a lot less likely, to be turned away as well. Because that's an arrangement that we had where they will go from prison straight through, right?
What's the latest update in terms of the digitization of your files here at the prison?
At last Friday, the process was almost 95 to 96% completed. I was advised that there were about 34,000 and some files to be done, and there were over 30,000 up to last Friday. So I believe by this week they should have gone into another 1,000 or more. So it's supposed to finish by December though. They're supposed to be finished by December, and they have about 5 or 6 contract workers. So they did a lot, and they started in August 2022. So we're almost at the end now.
And what are some of the best business practices needed in terms of the running of the prison at this point? I know we would have had conversations regarding the handbook that you have, but generally, what are some of the best business practices at the end of the day?
Okay, so the management would have gone through a process of reviewing all of our systems, all of them. We reviewed the strategic plan. We would have reviewed recently here, just last month, the talent management and development policy, all right? And that has been updated to 2024. So those are the 2 main documents that we will use here in relation to helping to redirect what's happening in terms of the prison going forward, because the talent management policy or document captures everything in relation to from the time you recruit right up to the point where you aspire to become a superintendent of prisons. It captures every single rank in the prison service. The strategic planning document that was done in 2021, so normally it's a 5-year document, so we're in the process of reviewing that. It's just a few more pages to go, and then we'll have a completely new review of that, complete review of that document. And those are the 2 documents that will guide us in the future.
What are some of the systems in place to ensure the well-being of your officers?
Okay, we have a staff welfare and entertainment committee. We also have the medical unit staff who would assist and reach out to the psychologists and the psychiatrists who works with us in terms of consultant to help in relation to addressing those issues with staff. This whole issue relating to staff well-being is an ongoing process, because at the end of the day, you know, the whole issue relating to staff is it has this whole thing about it has this whole thing about client, professional person's privilege. So basically, it has a component where it has to be a lot of confidentiality going on in relation to the well-being of staff. It's up to staff to reach out to someone, a peer, to explain to them that they might have an issue. But basically, at the end of the day, we try to do as much as we can with the resources that we have here to address. We also have the availability of network services as well, if there are issues where staff can be referred. But then we also have the families of the staff who will have to be playing a vital role in relation to addressing any issues related to staff well-being. As I said, the entertainment committee that deals with certain aspects of it, and the staff welfare and entertainment, but they can only do so much, right? So a lot of the things that will lead to staff well-being has to start with the staff themselves. There has to be a component where they do physical exercises at some point in time. They eat properly, they get good rest and such like it. And you know, so is a whole set of different issues relating to ensuring staff well-being and health as well. But it starts with the individual.
How are you seeking to address those concerns regarding extended shift systems and that type of thing?
Well, that's something where the minister is going to speak to shortly. But what I can say to you is that we've resorted to a 5 shift, 8-hour, 40-hour week, so the long hours do not exist anymore.
No longer in existence.
No longer exists.
How do you continue to try to contribute to public safety where the Barbados Prison Service is concerned as well?
Okay, in terms of public safety, we are constantly reviewing our systems here. All of our systems, we're constantly reviewing and upgrading. We are also placing a lot of emphasis on training and sensitizing the staff to the do's and don'ts that will present unnecessary security risks. So as soon as we do those things, I believe that we'll be on our way to helping contribute to public safety from that aspect of it.
Thank you so much for your time, Superintendent. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
You're most